What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Travis. This is TWA Motorsports, and today we are back on the truck, and it is a nice, brisk day. It's like 47 degrees, which is awesome. It's a huge change of pace from what I'm used to. It is normally like 100 degrees, but guys, I'm just in love with this truck. I just keep parking it and looking at it. I just love the look of it, especially with the new paint. It just looks so good. But today, we're gonna address something that I talked about when I first lowered this, and we still have some suspension things to mess with, but today we're going to be putting the helper bags on the back. And the reason being is and I knew this was going to happen, it's a V6 truck, so it's a V8 spring. The front didn't come down as much as I wanted to, so I had a couple options, right? So I could chop the spring down in the front a little bit, but if I ever do a V8, that's going to really hammer the front down, and I just don't want to do that. So my alternative, and I wanted to do this anyway, is to put some lift or helper bags in the back. And so that is what we're going to be doing today to get this. It's actually about a ½ inch lower in the back, which makes it look really kind of goofy. On this angle, it doesn't look too bad because my driveway kind of slopes down, but it's actually a ½ inch lower in the back, and I wanted to get it actually a ½ inch higher in the back. That way it looks level when it's going down the road. So here's what we're going to be installing. It is a Mcgaughys helper bag kit, and pretty self-explanatory. Honestly, guys, I have never put one of these on this body style truck or this year truck, so I wanted to show you guys the process. And it basically works with the Mcgaughys notch, and you'll be able to see what I'm talking about once I get that off. So if you don't have the Mcgaughys notch, you may have to do something a little bit different, but this works really well with it. And there's not a whole lot to it other than bolting stuff on. So we're gonna go ahead, get the truck lifted up, and once I've got the wheels chalked in the front, obviously so it doesn't roll off, but we're gonna get the truck lifted up and get the wheels off, and then we'll talk about what our next steps are. So once you have the wheel off, you're gonna have to take out these 4 bolts. And the reason you're gonna have to do that is because this bracket actually is built to set right here. And they do supply longer bolts because obviously this bolt was not meant to go through both this plate and the frame and your C-notch. So they do supply new bolts, but we're gonna go ahead, take all 4 of these out, and should be 3/4 is what they, well, at least that's the new one. Pretty sure these are the same, came from the same company. But knock these out, we'll get this bracket into place on both sides, and we'll snug these back down with the new bolts. So as you can see, we got all those out. The bottom 2 kind of are a pain because you have the 2 coming in from the bottom. So I had to look back there and get my wrench seated in the right direction. But basically now, all we need to do is using our new hardware, and they are a little bit longer. I actually think the factory ones would have worked, but we're gonna set this up into place, push this through, and get this all bolted up into place. Once we do that, we can go ahead and snug them down. And I'm gonna kind of thread these in, not quite as far, because like I said, you're gonna run into those bolts on the bottom, so you still need room to sneak the washer and the nut on the back side. So I may have to thread these in by hand, just so I don't run into that on the back side. So once you have your brackets bolted in place, and I have them on both sides, I went ahead and installed the other side. Exact same process, take the old bolts out, put the new bolts in with the bracket. We need to loosen up one side at a time, basically is what we're gonna be doing. But we're gonna loosen up the bolts on this side, and once we get those taken completely off, we're going to be able to slide the new plate. I'll show you here. This guy here is going to slide over that centering pin that's underneath your flip kit. So go ahead, loosen these up, and then I'll show you the process. Basically, we're going to jack up the rear end on this side to lift it up enough to get this on the centering pin, and then we're going to have to take a few measurements and kind of decide where we want the bag to set, because as you can tell, this is slotted so the bag can go inward or outward, and obviously if you're using a wider tire, you're going to want it to be a little more inward, but we need to mark that. But before we do that, like I said, let's go ahead, get these U-bolts off, or at least loose. I think we're going to have to take them completely off in order to get enough room to slide this in. So as you can see, I have that centering pin going through not only the new bracket that we put in, but your saddle as well. So make sure that that all lines up and everything's good, and then I set the rear end back down on it. And now our next step is we need to put the bag in place and basically see where we're going to mount it, because we're going to have to take this back out to actually bolt the bag in place. But I'm going to go grab the bag, we'll put it here and kind of see which direction it needs to go, and then we'll mark it, take this back out, bolt the bag on, and then we can put it all back together. Now I went ahead and blew up the bag in order to get this piece on the bottom where I needed it, because they come collapsed, and it just makes it really hard to measure where you want it to be. But anyway, we've got it in place, and I think really kind of right in the center is where I want it. I don't see any reason not to put it there, so I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to mark this, we're going to take this all back apart, and then we're going to go ahead and bolt the bag to the bottom bracket here. Now it does say to use some thread locker on this bottom one that goes in, so make sure that you do that. And like I said, really not a whole lot there. I don't even know that you would necessarily need to mark it. I mean, you can if you'd like, but it's side to side, it's not back and forth, so it's only going to go in one spot as far as here, but back and forth. Now if you have a wider tire, obviously you're going to want to mount it further inward, but if you're not, if you're running, you know, I'm not running a super wide tire, I'm going to mount it kind of right in the center. One thing while you're putting this together that you need to take note of is that this needs to line up, I'll show you here, this right here needs to line up straight. If you bolt this down and it's like this, you're not going to be able to line it up with the top bracket. Now it doesn't say anything about that in the instructions, but believe me, in the past I've done that, and it just makes it a pain, because then you're trying to turn this and it just doesn't work. So we're going to go ahead, I'm going to put some just some blue Loctite. I didn't feel like red was really something I wanted to use on this if you ever want to take it apart. So put some blue Loctite on it, and we'll bolt this bottom piece together. Another thing to remember, guys, is don't get real crazy tightening this up. Now you want to get it nice and snug and smash that lock washer, but it is going into a piece of plastic and a threaded insert, so you don't want to get crazy, otherwise you'll strip that. Now that we got this bolted on, we can go ahead and put it back into place. It's going to be a little bit more cumbersome putting it back in, just because it has a big bag mounted to it now, but we'll get this slid underneath. I may have to well, yeah, maybe not. I don't think I'm strong enough to lift the rear end. I may have to take this completely off. And we'll lift this up. Get it in place here. And make sure that you're centering it in that pin that's underneath, and then make sure your saddle is sitting on top of that. And then once we do that, we can let the floor jack down, put pressure back on the rear end up against it, and we can just, I'm gonna go ahead and put the U-bolts on and then just snug them down. And then once we get them snug, not completely tightened up, we're gonna jack the truck up, kind of see what our alignment looks like, and then we'll go ahead and start threading these bolts in. So now that we have our U-bolts back into place, I've just snugged them down. They're not completely tight yet. I'm gonna go ahead and put basically 2 bolts in the top here. This middle one is for your airline, but I'm gonna go ahead and put 2 bolts in here. I'm not gonna snug those down yet because we may have to move it back and forth once I collapse the suspension. So this is not how the bag is normally gonna collapse. The only reason it's like this is because I blew it up. Once it has air in it, it deflates really nice. Actually looks like the one laying on the ground over there. But I'm gonna go ahead, like I said, thread. I'll probably go ahead and put the washers on it, but I'm gonna go ahead and thread that in. We will go to the other side, get that bracket installed, because there is one other thing that you have to do on the passenger side. But for now, this is where I want it to be. And well, I guess I won't really know until I get the suspension collapsed, but we're gonna go ahead, put those in. We'll go to the other side. I'll show you the other basic. I'm not gonna show you this part because you guys know basically you loosen up the U-bolts, align everything, and then, but there's a bracket that you have to move because of the e-brake cable. Now on this other side, the process is pretty much the same. I went ahead and got this slid into place, but as you can see, the emergency brake cable is right in the way of the bag. So they send in the kit basically a relocation bracket. So we need to unbolt that 13 millimeter that you see right here, and there's a bracket that moves that out of the way that comes with the kit. So I'm gonna go ahead, we'll take this loose, and I'm not gonna put the bracket on until after the bag's in. This must be the longest bolt ever. Anyway, once we get this out, we'll go ahead and do the exact same thing that we did before. We'll mount up look at the bag, make sure the placement's good side to side, and then we'll go ahead, get the bag in place, and then I will show you guys the next step, which is obviously we're going to do the same thing, but we'll show you the process of moving this and the bracket. So now that we have the bag in place, and I just threaded these in the top, and I went ahead and tightened the U-bolts, not completely, but I've got them snug down, we can go ahead and put this bracket in the center. Now how this works is it's kind of it's a 90 on one side and about a 45 on the other. The 90 is going to go up against the truck, and the 45 is going to go up against the brake line cable, or the e-brake cable that we took off. So just a 1/2 inch wrench. I'm going to use the original 13 to bolt it to the truck, and then it comes with hardware to bolt this tab here to the end. Well, now we have that bracket in place. Not a whole lot to it, guys. I did have to pull it out of the top of the rear end in order to get it over far enough, and then I just set it back in once I was finished. But now we are ready to start tightening up those top mounts. Now, one thing you want to take note of is obviously you want enough room with the frame, so don't slide it all the way back where it's hitting anything. And I actually think where we're at is pretty good. You can, even sliding it all the way back is not going to cause any problems. You just want to make sure that there's plenty of clearance with the bolts and the frame on the back side. And we can go ahead, snug these down. I'm going to put a little bit of thread locker. Actually, you know what? I'm not going to put thread locker on that. And then we will grab the 90 that goes in here, and that is for your air fittings. Now, actually, before I tighten these down, I'm going to go ahead and thread this in so I make sure that I don't pinch it. Well, basically, you can move this to where it won't go in. So I'm going to go ahead and thread this in. Now, it does already have pipe threading on it, so you don't have to worry about putting anything on it. It is a 9/16 like everything else. The cool thing is I like to point it back where it's going on the top side of the frame. So we'll go ahead, snug this down, and once we get it snug, then we can go ahead and tighten down the 9/16 on the outside. Same thing here, guys. Don't get real crazy. You are going into a threaded piece of plastic. Well, I mean, there's an insert, but that insert sets in plastic, and it doesn't take a lot. if it leaks, you can always go back and tighten it up. Once you get everything snugged down, it's time to route our lines. Now the kit does come, everything's push connect, which is really, really nice, guys. It comes with enough line, and it comes with some zip ties to zip tie the lines up, which to be quite honest with you, you're probably gonna need more than that. But you have a T-fitting that goes somewhere in the center, and you guys can kind of decide what's best for your application. But the Schrader valve, and where you basically air this thing up, a lot of times people will mount this under the truck. I actually like to use the license plate screw. So what I do is I'll take the license plate screw out, and I will basically use this as a license plate screw. That way it's nice and accessible. The downside is it's gold. I wish it weren't gold, but I could probably find something else online. But everything pushes on. So as far as the lines, all you have to do is just push this together. And then if you want to take it apart, there's a little collar here that moves back and forth. You can push that collar and then the line will release. Really, really simple. So I'm gonna go ahead and start routing the lines. Like I said, I like to have them facing this direction. Now these can move all around even once it's tightened. I like to face back, and then like on the other side where the exhaust is, obviously you want to try to stay clear of the exhaust, but I will probably put my T somewhere back on the spare tire, right behind the spare tire, before it goes into the license plate hole. But I will show you guys that once I'm all finished. And like I said, I'm not gonna really show you this process because I don't have a good way to show you, but you're just gonna plug the line in. What I do is I get one line ran, that way I know, because it's all one solid piece, so you're gonna have to obviously cut it. But run one line back to where you want the T, leave yourself a little extra, go to the other side, do the same, and then you can finish up with what you have left. So as you can see, I went ahead and took out the little piece that holds your screw, and I'm gonna actually put it on this side. So I did have to clearance the license plate a bit in order for this guy to come through, and I already have it hooked up. I'll show you guys the lines here in a minute. But now basically what we're going to do is we're gonna thread that through, and that is going to be basically our mounting bracket for the where you put air in and take air out. Well, as you can see, we now have this in place. I do have the cap on it, which I guess I can go ahead and take off because we are about ready to test it. I'll show you guys underneath kind of how I routed the lines. So you can see the one going up to the license plate into the T, and then I did zip tie to some wire loom that was already under the truck. You need to make sure you keep it away from any heat, so make sure you go up over the frame. That is why I had those pointing back. And same thing over here, went up over the frame. I know this looks like crap, but I'm gonna figure something out for the 4 flat for a trailer later. I don't even have the hitch on right now, so it doesn't really matter. I might occasionally pull something with this truck, so I probably will put the hitch back on, but for now I just kind of got it tied up. I went over the frame over here, and you can see it coming into the T, but now we are ready to test it. So basically what I'm gonna do before I put the wheels back on is I'm gonna go ahead and make sure there's no leaks, make sure it holds pressure. And then once we do that, we'll go ahead and put the wheels back on, set it down on the ground. I've got to go ahead and tighten up my U-bolts on the bottom, and of course we'll get the wheels back on, obviously, and then I'll show you guys kind of how much movement you have with this thing. So this is just with 35 PSI in the bag, and you saw that bag kind of conform into shape. And like I said, it doesn't look like it did when I had it all blown apart. It actually kind of rolls over itself. So no leaks. It's held 35 PSI for probably about 5 minutes now. And so now we're gonna go ahead, I'm gonna go ahead and put the wheels on. I'm gonna lift the back up. I'll probably go ahead and torque it down with weight on the rear end, go ahead and torque down the U-bolts. I won't show you guys that process because if you watch the lowering video, I talked about all the torque specs in there. But we'll get the wheels back on, get it on the ground, and then like I said, I'll show you guys kind of how much movement we have on the truck. So we have it down on the ground now, and you can see a pretty substantial difference already. This is 35 pounds in the bags, and obviously I'm not gonna run them that way all the time, but it's nice if you're ever hauling something or you load up the bed. And anyway, I'm gonna set up my tripod, guys. You need to keep at least 5 pounds in these bags at all times is what Mcgaughys calls for. but I'm gonna take it down to 5, and then I'm gonna take it back up to 90, which is the max amount that they call for, so you guys can see the difference. And like I said, I'll set you here on the tripod and show you kind of how far it goes up and down. So as you can see from that, it moves a lot. Right now it's got 5 pounds in it. That's very, very close to where we were before, maybe just a hair higher, and it actually looks pretty good there. So I'll probably run anywhere from 5 to 10 in it, but I wanted to give you guys a different angle. I'm gonna take it back up to 90 and back down to 5 again. Well guys, hopefully you were able to see, I'm sure you were, I looked back at the film and it looked like you were able to see pretty well how much this thing moves. It moves a ton. I didn't measure it, but I will tell you that I've got about 15 pounds in now, and it's about a ½ inch higher in the back, which is exactly what I was looking for, and it gives me the ability to haul stuff around. I know a lot of you guys probably think that I'm just gonna let this truck set. I'm not gonna drive it, but we are going to drive this truck. It is going to be a work truck. We are going to use it. So, guys, I will list everything that I use down in the description below. Parts, there's not a whole lot of parts, it's just one kit. But anyway, I'll list that down in the description below. If you guys like this video, if you thought it was informative, please smash that thumbs up button like always, guys. And well, if you're not subscribed, like always, go down, hit that subscribe button, make sure you ring that bell icon, that way you're notified every single time we drop a new video. And well, stay tuned to see what we do on this truck next.